Cam Rising is fired up to play BYU in 2024. We're reacting to his latest comments on the rivalry, also talking about more of the best thoughts and things to come out of Big 12 Media Day. And Utah is returning to the Rose Bowl to face off against a familiar Pac-12 foe. All that and more on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments, as well as on social media, where you can follow our show on X at Locked On Utes today. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel. FanDuel allows you to make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. You visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is JT Wistricll, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about a bevy of topics from Big 12 Media Days, closing with the announcement that Utah has scheduled a future foe in 2025 and 2030, that being UCLA. We're excited to renew the rivalry with the Bruins, but have to start with the comments, of course, made by Cam Rising about BYU. Cam is obviously fired up to be playing BYU, as I think most of us just forget the fact that Cam didn't get a chance to play BYU because he was Charlie Brewer's backup the last time the game took place. So when Utah beat BYU, when BYU beat Utah in 2021, Cam Rising wasn't present there. And now what's exciting is he will be more than present, and he is fired up to play BYU because he was on BYU TV Sports Nation and just straight up said, I don't really like BYU, which I absolutely love because that's a sentiment, obviously, a lot of us echo. Now, personally, I have a lot of fun with the rivalry that is BYU in that sense. But look, I think someone like Cam Rising, as many Utah fans I'm sure can relate, have probably got negative comments from BYU fans before. Heard BYU fans say like, oh, you're lucky you haven't played us yet. Like, I mean, Cam Rising's a true Utah guy. And if you go for Utah, you don't cheer or like BYU, right? So that's where I love this response and I love this answer. And he was also asked in a separate press conference, just like what he thinks about BYU. And he said plainly, I want to go down there with their butts. But he didn't use butts, as we all know. And I love this comment. And I'm not the only one, too. BYU offensive lineman, Connor Pay, right, said he wouldn't want to have it any other way. And honestly, that's how he feels about every team, which is 1,000% right. Like, every team you play, you want to whip their butts. And any team you play, you don't really like them that much on the field. Obviously, it's different with your rival, which is what Cam was alluding to, but I thought Connor Pay hit the nail on the head, too. So I love that Cam went just right in and was honest. I mean, that's one of the great things about Cam Rising is his honesty so often with the media. He will be very blunt. I remember after the 2022 Pac-12 championship game, he had some choice words about them getting the win and a few of the things there. He obviously had choice comments about BYU and the rivalry there. I love that Cam keeps it real on how he feels. And look, it's not surprising that he doesn't like BYU. And that's a comment that only endures himself more to Utah fans. And that's the one thing outside of winning a third straight conference championship that isn't on Cam Rising's resume. Sure, there's minor things, but win against your rival, the school's rival, BYU. That's just one thing that Cam didn't get the chance to have because he wasn't playing all the years that Utah played BYU. It's just kind of a weird patch in the rivalry where there weren't the games in 22 and 23. And now here we are in 24 and finally get to see each other again. And, Cam Rising's fired up about it. And Junior Tafuna had a great quote about the rivalry too. He said he's still sore about that loss from 21 because Tafuna did play in it. He said he wished them the best of luck, but he knows who he'll be rooting for that day. And I love this quote too, as many people have brought up too. He said, we'll go to church and battle it out the next week. And that's what makes this rivalry so much fun, right? Is the religious, just obviously the things that tie the state of Utah together, those implications that you have so many guys that go to church together and then they're brothers in that sense, but then they can line up across for each other and go back and forth on the field. That the bond that is football is so connected deeply to faith in general. That's one thing we love. And then, but you can still be brothers and friends and family, just like after the game. Even though Cam's like, I don't like BYU, he's still going to be shaking hands after the game with a bunch of these guys who he's got who are friends over there. But you best believe he wants to beat those guys very badly because those are his rivals. So I fired up about the rivalry. Love these comments from Cam Jr. as well too. And I love that Utah's been itching to get the opportunity, because even though Utah had dominated the rivalry from a win standpoint, winning those 10 straight before they played BYU, BYU got the last one. So they've had the bragging rights. And it's fun that we're going to get a new team and a new chapter in this historic rivalry in 2024. Something I can't wait for. Love that Cam Rising is fired up for it too. And I love that he kept it real, that he doesn't like BYU because that's the rival. And once again, just excited and fired up to see this play out too. One other thing I thought that was cool was we did see Coach Whitt get asked by the BYU TV Sports Nation crew just about his relationship with Kalani Sitake, because obviously the fan bases, and this is something I mentioned on my show before too, but the fan base, the negative discourse between the two can definitely cross lines very frequently, which is ironic because the head coaches, the leaders of the two programs, are actually incredibly close friends. Obviously, Kalani worked at Utah for a very long time, worked under Coach Whittingham, and they're incredibly close still. And he kind of mentioned how just because we're in the same conference doesn't mean that change. And that's absolutely the truth. I love that these guys have this, they want to beat each other as bad as anyone. But this goes back to football again. What makes football so great? It can be your brother, but if they're lined up across from you, then that's the competitive spirit kicks in. You want to beat them badly. And that's no different amongst the coaches, which I love. But I love that there's that respect. And that was illustrated by Junior Tafuna when I talked about earlier too. I think the respect factor is very important in both on the field and for us on social media and the things of that nature too. And I'm not trying to be too friendly here. I'm just saying I see the negative discourse. This rivalry should be fun. This is the point I'm getting at. And it should be fun for everyone. I know it's fun for people when you poke at someone and do things like that, but lines can be crossed like that. So I have already spoken to some people who aren't looking forward to this rivalry because of how negative the discourse is. And I think that's disappointing because it's awesome when you get to play your rival. So I hope that we can be a little more positive. I know it's the internet and I know it's tough, and we can have fun disagreeing with each other. BYU fans pop up in my comments all the time. That's the fun of this, is right. We have these different opinions. We can debate and go back and forth. And this fall we get to see which of these two teams is better. But love that Kyle Whittingham and Kalani Sitake are so close friends. I love that all the players involved, from a Connor Pay to Junior Tafuna, and obviously Cam Rising being the marquee name in the matchup, are just fired up for the rivalry and have such exciting thoughts on it too. So can't wait to see that get underway this fall, and love Cam's just blunt and honest reaction about how he feels about the Cougars. And it's one that's echoed by many Utah fans for sure. So those were some quotes from Cam Rising. Want to talk about some more Kyle Whittingham's quotes from over the weekend, because he had a lot of interesting ones. And there were even some other fascinating quotes, I thought, from the other Big 12 coaches, and just a lot of stuff throughout Big 12 Media Day that now has officially concluded that we need to dive into. And we're going to be discussing those things in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you all about our fabulous friends at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have more than winded down, we just have fewer and fewer games. And the sports they're not sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So you can head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. MLB All-Star Game is coming up, so we're in a little bit of a break there right now. But very soon, we're going to be seeing the top teams back in action, going to work. Also going to get to soon see, with the arrival of Big 12 Media Days, we'll have college football. We'll have NFL football. But until then, we have Major League Baseball. So lots of still exciting stuff going on in the sports world. So make sure you guys head over to FanDuel today and get in on all the action. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Alrighty, let's keep it rolling with some more Pac-12 media, Big 12 Media Day. I apologize. I did that a few times this week now. Still getting used to it. I felt bad for the Pac-12 media, by the way. I'm just going to say that. Not the Pac-12 media. I felt bad for the conference. I saw their little media day. It makes me sad. This is not how I didn't want things to go this way. Fired up to be in the Big 12, but I've long said before, I was not a fan of the change. I liked college football the way it was. I wish we still had our 5 power conferences with all these different conference championships. And it's just disappointing that and yes, this is more than a thing that's passed, but it was just sad watching the Pac-12 media day and seeing the just Oregon State and Washington State there, and know that it's unfortunate that this is the world we live in and it's changed. But moving on from that, let's talk about Big 12 media days. So Kyle Whittingham gave some more thoughts. I like what he talked about when he talked about how Utah has the roster to compete right away. And I loved that he mentioned the media preseason voting and talked about it being a sign of respect. I was glad that he actually did acknowledge it. I know some people are like, it doesn't mean anything. And Kyle Whittingham knows that in the grand scheme of things. But I like that he can appreciate, like, hey, this is a sign of respect. And we do appreciate the media thinking highly of us. Like, I think it was very kind and of the media to look at Utah and be like, hey, this is the best. Like, it's just it's a cool thing to acknowledge of, hey, it's an appreciation for all the hard work, the reputation, and everything you've done. We're acknowledging that with his high preseason ranking atop the Big 12. I think it was cool that he acknowledged that, even though he did also say it doesn't mean anything in the final analysis, and we're aware of that, but we appreciate the respect. And he said he feels like there's a lot of similarities between Oklahoma State and Utah, which we've talked about before, which are really exciting. Thankfully, Kyle Whittingham handles his press conferences a little bit better than Mike Gundy does normally, but we'll save that for another show. Keeping it going, one thing he talked about is his longevity at Utah. He's attributed to recruiting the right players, just credits the culture and his assistants as well. And this is the truth. Utah has been so good in general, and especially in the NIL era, because they recruit the right type of players that fit their systems. When Utah first broke through in 2021, their recruiting class was not lighting it up by any stretch of the imagination, but they recruited the right guys, the Brant Keithys, the Devin Lloyds, who were overlooked by everyone except for Utah. They found those guys, they brought them in, helped them grow and develop into elite players. Same thing for Dalton Kincaid, Cam Rising. We could go on and on and on about these guys. And Cam was a decent recruit at Texas, but had to transfer away from there and have found an opportunity at Utah. Utah found the right group of players through their recruiting and then develop them with the strong assistant coaches they have watching over them and the culture in place where these players know if you come into Utah, you buy into Utah's system, not the other way around. Utah's not changing for you. You have to buy into the system. And because you have all of these recruits that you've brought in that are bought into your system and belief, transfers can't come in and say, we did it this way at my old school, we're going to do it this way here. If that's your thought as a transfer, you're not going to play at Utah. Utah makes it clear, as Kyle Whittingham has even said, you will change for us, not the other way around. And I think that's very important. And I love that Coach Whitt is shouting out his assistants because those guys do a great job recruiting. And the culture at Utah is one of the best in college football. Kyle Whittingham deserves a ton of credit for that too. And I am just really like that answer of him because I think he hit the nail on the head for why Utah has been successful. Talks about he knows you have to adapt with the times or be left behind in terms of the NIL, and that Utah is trying to get more resources, which is something we've heard as they're continuing to up their NIL antics. But Coach Whitt has done a good job adopting. Obviously, he's not long for the college football coaching profession, and by that I mean he said he's probably not going to be there in 2027, but he's been able to make it since NIL has been regulated because of the adjustments he's been willing to make and how he's adapted his coaching style. Not every coach has been able to do that across the country. We've seen many of them get fired or resigned, and just it doesn't work out. Coach Whitt is leaving on his own terms whenever he does hang it up because he's adapted so well and helped Utah remain at the forefront of what was the Pac-12 and what we expect to be the Big 12 coming up this fall. Another thing he talked about was that Utah, they're just the physicality and what's made the Utah brand so good. Just talked about how consistent their defense has been and also credited the recruiting too for why they've been successful. Because when asked how does he fit in the Big 12, like the changes and all of that, he said they're very similar because so many teams are spread now, but the common traits are being what succeeds in football, at least in Kyle Whittingham's terms, is being a physical team up front. And that's what Utah prides themselves on. They pride themselves on running the ball well and having an elite defense. And that was something that I think is absolutely true with when you look at this Utah brand. They've beat up on finesse programs like USC because Utah has become the bully. And they were able to bully the Trojans on a few occasions over the last few seasons. That's something that Utah has done an exceptional job of. So I like that Kyle Whittingham just continues to preach that physicality because we know it's something that's not going away at Utah. Thought it was very interesting, by the way, that Kyle Whittingham did bring up too, the running back is the position he has the most questions about right now. I would have thought offensive line, as I said, coming into this, but he has he spoke about at length about his faith in Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano. And I feel good about those guys, but we just like Lomu, I've never even seen and take a meaningful college football snap. I think he played a little bit last year, but I think it was all in garbage time. And obviously Fano for a freshman, played very well, but still very much so had his ups and downs. And even though he's back in his natural position of right tackle, still got to see him produce at that level before I'm like, oh yeah, Utah's right tackle is completely set and secured, nothing to worry about there. Until we see those guys at that level, there's going to be some concern. We've even talked about that with the secondary too. We think the offensive line and secondary will be good because of the coaching that Utah has there, but still need to see those improvements before we feel great about them. And Kyle Whittingham needs to see more out of his running backs, he said. And while he still kind of waits and determines who's the guy, Anthony Woods, Mekhi Bernard, is it going to be a back by committee thing? Mike Mitchell was one of the breakout stars of spring ball. Is he going to get a lot of carries? Where does Jalen Glover factor into everything still? A lot up in the air for this Utah football backfield that I think will be exciting to monitor and follow. One thing I thought was really exciting and interesting is something that comes to us from Josh Furlong, as he pointed out a question that Coach Whittingham brought up and answered at Pac-12 at Big 12 Media Days. He said that they've made some changes to how they're going to operate in fall camp so far. This comes to us once again from Josh Furlong's feed on X. He said, yeah, we've done a few things. We're changing the format of fall camp to more of a ramp up like the NFL does. Instead of just hitting the ground running, we're going to go 2 days, take a day off, go 3 days, take a day off, go 4 days, take a day off. And there's a ramping effect there. Also in the strength room, we've done some modifications in our lifting to try and prevent soft tissue injuries. We've looked at the warm-up and stretch routines that we do. So we've looked at every possible angle we have, and we'll implement some of those this fall. That's music to my ears. Absolutely. I think last year, more than anything, was bad luck in terms of the injuries, but doesn't mean you can't always take an opportunity to evaluate and get better. The people in the NFL are the best of the best. The sports performance, the science, the medicine, all of the numbers, access to data and research, and it's proven to be effective. And they do as good a job as they can of trying to prevent injuries from as physical of a sport in football. And I think it's great that Utah is copying that model and applying it to their own practices, seeing as they did deal with so many injuries last year. Also on an injury note, we talked about this a little bit, but Coach Whitt did say Logan Fano's full go, which should get everyone fired up because he was on an absolute tear last year before his injury, even got hurt on a sack. So he's dealt with some crushing injuries, but I think Logan Fano, I would expect Connor O'Toole to lead Utah in sacks. I think Logan Fano has absolutely a chance to lead Utah in sacks still, and if would be my pick to be second if I just had to rank him right now. So love hearing that Fano's healthy and love that Utah's making these changes and adjustments to do everything they can to reduce and risk and lower the odds of injuries, because this is football. You want to try to be as smart and as cautious as you can because injuries are going to occur. So everything you can do to lower the probability of them is something I absolutely love. I want to talk about one comment that did not come from Kyle Whittingham, as TCU head coach Sonny Dykes spoke on Utah joining the league. Josh Furlong also did a good job pointing this out on his X account. He talked about how Utah is adding how the Big 12 is adding some successful teams. You're looking at Utah and the success they've had over the last 20 to 25 years. It's been on par with just about anybody in college football. That quote right there sounds exactly like why EA named Utah one of the top brands in the sport, right? They named Utah an elite team because they are consistently always bowl eligible year in and year out, having a winning record constantly when so much change and turnover happens. The consistency under Kyle Whittingham and just that Utah's experience is why we believe they'll win the Big 12. They've been more consistent over that 10-year span than anyone in the Big 12. They have so many players who have balled out and won on the biggest stage, that being conference championships. I understand the biggest stage can also be college football playoffs, but during the regular season, the biggest stage is the conference championship game you reach because of what you did in the regular season. Utah has a lot of the guys that have helped them capture not one, but two of those. So love that Utah's getting the recognition, and it's true. The brand that Utah's established, the success they've had, is a large reason why they're favored to win the Big 12 this fall, and I can't wait to watch it play out. But while we have to wait a while to still see Utah make their season debut game, August 29th against Southern Utah, for anyone who's counting, because we all definitely are counting down the days. We did get some report that Utah and UCLA have scheduled a home and home series beginning in 2025, with the first game being played at the Rose Bowl, and the second one will be played at Utah in 2030. So, well, first of all, it's hilarious how spread out those games are, but I love that Utah is already getting back with some of their old Pac-12 schools. the rivalries that were forged during Utah's time in the Conference of Champions were so much fun to be a part of. What was the next chapter of UCLA's battle going to be? What was the next chapter going to look like when Utah took on Oregon? And I'm glad with the Bruins, we get to find that out next year. I'm very curious what the Bruins are going to look like too. Got a new head coach in there, Eric Bieniemy's their offensive coordinator, but recruiting took a hit with Chip Kelly exiting there. So still a lot of things that they're trying to figure and sort out in general. So I'm very curious to see what the state of the Bruins program is after this year. I think they're going to take a lot of lumps their first year in the Big 12, just tough schedule, rebuilding roster. Ethan Garbers ain't in it at quarterback if you're trying to be one of the best teams in college football either. So that's a part of it too. But love that Utah is playing a Big 12 team right away. Love that they are also in the California market once again. It's something Mark Harlan spoke to in the release, talked about the importance of staying in the California market. And I think that's just that UCLA is still a big brand. So I love that Utah gets to play them next year. And who doesn't love going back to the Rose Bowl, right? I'm sure there will be a lot of us who make the trek out again to Pasadena, even though it's not the same as the Rose Bowl. It's still an awesome venue and a historic one that we love to see our Utes play in. So excited that Utah is going to be back in the Rose Bowl, renewing a rivalry with the Bruins a little bit. Not a super heated one, but still one that was forged nonetheless from just playing in the same conference. So really fired up about that and this game. And it'll be interesting to see when they come to Utah in 2030, because the last few times the Bruins came out to Rice-Eccles Stadium, did not go very well for them. So that was smart of them to try to push that way down the road. And like that Utah is going to challenge themselves a little bit by going to California, because last time they went to California, they did lose their game in 2022 it was. And then when they played in 23, obviously Utah took care of business against Dante Moore, but it didn't go Utah's way in 22. So I'm excited to see. In fact, Utah's lost their last 3 games now in the Rose Bowl. So I'm looking forward to Utah hopefully getting a win in the Rose Bowl next year. But either way, love staying connected with a Pac-12 opponent, a big brand, and should be a matchup that has some marquee draw on TV early in the season. That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. What do you guys think of Pac-12 Media Day? What do you think of Cam Rising's quotes? Are you excited to play UCLA again? Drop all of your comments below. Love to hear your guys' thoughts. On tomorrow's show, Max Chadwick, one of the top college football analysts at PFF, is going to be joining me. We're going to go position by position through the Big 12 and talk about where Utah ranks at each position. It's a real football nerdy show. I hope you guys enjoy it. There's a lot of fun discussion going to be involved in it. Hope you all have a fantastic weekend as well. Thank you for supporting the Big 12 media coverage all week long. Have to go back to some off-season content next week, but still plenty of fun stuff to talk about on Locked On Utes, from recruiting, season preview, award watch list. We got a lot to cover on Locked On Utes. Hope you'll join me next week. As always, go Utes.